Anna van Steenbergen. Everbeating. Tokyo, 1885. It was a dark and stormy night. Lit paper lanterns swung in the gusty wind like huge red fireflies. Unfriendly weather chased most of the townfolks inside. The unison chatting of the countless voices was so loud it was easy to hear despite the gale, voices speaking both English and Japanese. "I'm not the only one," thought Ash, somehow relieved. "I never was, ever since I came to this place." The proceeding westernization of the land of the rising sun and rapid technological development in the field of international transportation kept the foreigners coming, especially at this time of the year. The sakura blossoming should begin any day now. Tokyo Bay and the newly built international airport were overcrowded with people, forcing the crew to work around the clock. Even now he would see the pulsating lights of the incoming airship if he raised his head up. He came on a ship like this himself once. 2, maybe 3 years ago. He hadn't really counted. He never cared. The time was irrelevant as long as he had his job, his purpose, and his goal to make the world a better place. And her, as long as she was by his side. "Watch it!" An angry voice startled him. Ash stepped aside at the very last moment before a speeding steam cart rode him over. It moved so fast the only thing he noticed was a glassy glint of the carter's goggles. The baka epithet, meaning idiot, faded out into the wind before even reaching the addressee's ears. "Where am I exactly?" he wondered, as if suddenly awakened from the weirdest of dreams. If he hadn't known better, his eyes could be easily fooled by the high Western-style buildings on both sides of the street. They always reminded him of London, where he came from. The Emperor's adoration for everything foreign had made Tokyo this way, causing the fusion of the colourful pointy pagodas with red brick facades and cast-iron gas streetlights. That fusion was all around. In the bilingual writings on the shops, in diverse clothing, even in music, that unique blend of a local sound with jazz and other popular genres flowing in from the furthest part of the world. Despite everything, it was still Japan all right. The rich could wear Western-style clothes, use forks and knives instead of chopsticks, and try to speak English or French with each other. But the Japanese spirit lived on, unshaken, in the dailiness of the common folk. A well-known distant wailing sound behind his back was like the sobering kick in the head. It reminded him why he was moping around the town at this hour in this crappy weather in the first place. With an effort, Ash peeled his feet off the sidewalk and ran, as usual, without any particular direction, driven by the naive hope he would be able to leave the things that haunted him behind. "It's not possible," whispered the inner rationalist. "Some sins can never be forgiven." The flash of red at the end of the street answered his earlier question. Kaminarimon, otherwise known as the Thunder Gate, the main entrance to the Senso Shrine in Asakusa. His temporary salvation awaited right behind that huge lantern, guarded by the 2 sculptures of gods. If he reached it, he'd be safe, for now. He sped up his pace and almost wept with relief at the sight of the people. Once an obscure fishing village along an estuary of Tokyo Bay, currently one of the capital's most flourishing districts, Asakusa never slept. Its popularity was caused by the variety of entertainment it provided. There were theatres, tea-houses, eateries, okiyas, and, last but not least, the famous Nakamise market. During his very first month in Japan, he used to come here often to buy mochi cakes or sweet manju buns. She loved manju more than anything. They would buy a whole bunch of them on their way to the temple. At first, he simply used to wait for her outside. Later on, he accompanied her during her ablutions, not because he shared her beliefs, but because looking at her praying simply made him happy. There was something peaceful about her routine, about the way she tied her sleeves up and then carefully poured the water on her hands in order to purify herself. He never told her that, in his opinion, she was the purest creature he ever met. That kind of purity either gets spoiled with time or is destroyed by the cruel world. At the end, he was the one who had destroyed her. When she saw him for who he really was, her heart broke in two. "Don't you believe in God?" She left him unforgiven, never to come back again. That was his last thought before crossing the gate. The market closed up at sunset, but all the pagodas were beautifully illuminated. Here and there pedestrians with umbrellas hurried home. Luckily, no sign of the police. Posters on the walls, now wet from the rain, announced the newest stage play with Otojiro Kawakami in the main role. At her request, he attended Kawakami's butai once. It was pretty entertaining. The Geisha and the Mechanical Knight, or something like that. Speaking of geishas, there weren't any to be seen from where he stood, but he could hear the typical mix of loud laughter and subtle shamisen music. Almost there. Taking cover from the rain under the high-pitched roofs of the Nakamisedori stores, Ash walked forward but didn't approach the temple. Instead, he took one of the small streets at the left side of the lane, allured by the familiar sounds and scents. He knew them so well that he could find the right place blindfolded. Blue Orchid never lacked clients. The men visiting were mostly well-heeled foreigners, but rumors said that some Japanese notables also liked to spend a pleasant evening, accompanied by their favorite girls. It was a brothel, all right. Nothing fancy like a real geisha house with the prettiest and best-educated girls serving tea, dancing capore, and performing all the skills required to entice someone really important. Yet not everyone was looking for a wife or a personal mistress. On the contrary, many came here on a primal whim to taste a girl or even a boy, both willing to do anything good money can buy. The bouncer by the door, a big, bald guy with thick eyebrows, thoroughly studied him head to foot. "Good evening," Ash greeted. "I'm Kanako's friend. Could you please call her for me?" "Kanako is busy. We have very important guests tonight. Closed party, no outsiders allowed." The bouncer's words sounded like some kind of recorded message, no more and no less. The owner could as well have put an automaton outside to guard the door. It wouldn't have made any significant difference. "Look, I don't want to pry, but it's important. In fact, it's a matter of life and death. I promise not to disturb the party. I just need to see Kanako." "Closed party, no outsiders allowed," repeated the bouncer flatly. Nothing would convince this machine pretending to be a human being to change his mind. Ash had only one option left. "Kanako!" he shouted as loud as possible, trying to push himself past the baldy. One punch in the midriff was more than enough to send him into the gutter. Kneeling, he coughed and inhaled like there was hardly any air left to breathe in this world. "What's going on here?" A familiar voice made him lift his head. A woman in a flowery kimono stood next to the baldy. "Blackwell-san!" A gold-colored mechanical eye blinked. The pupil narrowed with a whiz when she recognized him. "It's all right, Matsuda. He's my responsibility now." She came closer and offered Ash her hand. "Follow me." The main hall reeked of digested alcohol, sweat, and lust. By morning it would probably reek of piss and vomit as well. Ash didn't look inside from the corridor Kanako was leading him through, but obviously the very important guests were 3 sheets to the wind from whiskey and sake. Assuming from the nervous girlish squeal, some of them had already become touchy. Unmoved by the raucous atmosphere, Kanako silently led him upstairs, then stopped by the second shoji on the left. Following her example, Ash took off his shoes before entering. When the door slid behind them, the ruckus from the first floor faded away noticeably. It was a typical Japanese room, small and modestly equipped. Only a tea table, a cupboard embedded in the wall, and a futon on the tatami flooring. After all this time spent in Japan, Ash still couldn't adjust to the ubiquitous lack of space. Guess I'll remain the coddled gaijin till the day I die, but right now he felt so grateful for being here that he could have cried. "I didn't expect you today, Blackwell-san," said Kanako in surprisingly good English. This girl was equally fluent in French, which made her the most valuable asset of Madame Ran, the brothel's owner. "I gather," she commented with unprecedented diplomacy on the man's deplorable state, "that you need an accommodation for the night." "Forgive me this intrusion, Kanako. I really have nowhere else to go." No explanation needed. Gracefully, she knelt by the dimmed oil lamp standing on the table and freed the flame. In its increased light, the face under the thick white makeup appeared rather young, but her only eye could have just as well belonged to an elderly woman. Ash didn't even try to imagine the story behind that absent gaze. Compared to its emptiness, that synthetic object in the other orbit seemed genuine and vivid. "You did me an honor coming to me." Bowing reverently, Kanako finally broke the silence. "I owe you a lot." About a year ago, she had visited his workshop seeking help. She had just lost an eye to a snappy client who threw a bottle in her face. The medics had patched the deepest wounds from the broken glass, but her eye was beyond recovery. Mutilation in her profession was equal to joblessness. Good makeup could hide the scars, but she couldn't paint herself a new eye. However, only the rich could afford something as complicated as a fully operational mechanical eye. Kanako didn't have that kind of money, yet she was determined to do what it took, even offering her body to him, not that he ever considered accepting. "It's a painful procedure," he warned her. "Moreover, I'm still an apprentice. Theory is all I've got. If the eye I made doesn't work properly, your suffering will be in vain, and you'll lose the money. Are you ready to take that risk?" Damn she was. And so was he. Back then, his head was still filled with ideals. That's why he decided to use his extraordinary engineering abilities to create so-called automails for people who lost their own limbs one way or another. At the age of 22, he was sent by the British government to Japan to study under the supervision of the best engineers in the world. They taught him how to attach prosthetics to the living body, but also showed him a brand new discipline, the construction of eyes that could see and clever tiny devices for the hearing impaired. Only a few foreigners achieved that kind of honor. Kanako was the first person he had ever made an eye for. He was so proud and happy it worked as it should that he only asked her to cover material costs, half of those to be exact. "You can stay here till tomorrow. I'd gladly accommodate you longer, but I'm afraid Okasan won't permit it." She bowed apologetically. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I won't overstay. I'll be gone before you know it, I promise." "Would you like to eat something? You look like you could use a miso bowl or two." He had totally forgotten about eating. In fact, he couldn't recall when his last proper meal had been. "I'm indeed a little hungry." It was clearly an understatement. "Anything will do. Thank you, and Kanako, let's skip the formalities, shall we?" He gave her an encouraging smile. "Call me by my first name. It's Ashton, remember?" As always when he broached the subject, Kanako only shook her head. In this society, an uncrossable line existed between the indebted and the benefactor, a custom he couldn't exactly comprehend. After she left the room, Ash finally exhaled. Thank God. Somehow he had managed to escape his tail. The police won't look for him here, not tonight. As for the other thing... Abruptly alerted, he crouched against the wall, grasped the string of the bamboo shutter covering the window, and slowly pulled it up. The street drowned in darkness. The only audible sounds were from the pouring rain hitting the muddy ground and chiming down the Kusaridoi rain chain. The world outside felt desolate and peaceful at the same time. Suddenly, a single figure slipped out of the shadows and looked up as if searching for someone. Ash's blood instantly turned to ice. He shut up the blinders, quickly extinguished the light, and crawled to the futon. The faint sense of security, keeping his fears at bay, vanished, replaced by cold panic and a devastating feeling of loss. Huddled like a frightened child, he sobbed until his exhaustion finally overcame him. 1 year earlier. The most crucial factors in the production of automails are the materials. Copper is too soft. Iron, on the other hand, is too stiff and tends to rust easily. You cannot replace solid and flexible brass with any of them, like in the uncertified items sold on the black market. If you do so, the prosthesis' failure is simply a matter of days, not to mention that both discussed materials have already proven noxious for a living organism. Professor Takashima adjusted his double spectacles. To guarantee the recipient's safety, the junctions should be made of stainless steel, electrum, or gold. Depends on the individual budget. To preempt the question written all over your faces, gentlemen, brass and steel are also quite heavy for people to carry around, but as long as we haven't developed better, lighter, yet equally durable alloys, these are the only admissible and legitimate choices for you to make. One of the students raised his hand. "What about titanium, sensei?" he asked, given the permission to speak up. "It's much lighter and pliable than brass, it's heat-proof, corrosion-resistant, and according to the latest surveys, it doesn't poison the blood." We would all be more than happy to have the required amount of pure titanium at our disposal, Watabe-kun. Sadly, it's an extremely rare element. There haven't yet been found any considerable deposits in Japan. Importing bigger amounts of titanium from Australia, Canada, or even China would be a financial seppuku. It's unaffordable for most engineers, not to mention the recipients themselves. But most of all, we haven't been able to obtain pure metallic titanium so far. Now, let's get back to the main topic. Anyone willing to tell us what kind of materials are required to construct an artificial eye? He spotted a raised hand. Yamazaki-kun? Gold and electrum. Despite stainless steel's high sterility, some people are allergic to it, so by default we use it for the limbs only. The higher content of gold in the prosthesis, the bigger the chance it won't get rejected by the body. That's what makes the whole production process so expensive. As a result, only a few of us get the chance to master it. Yes, money rules the world. There's nothing we can do about that, so let's just... We should think further, sensei. All the faces, including the professor's, turned in the direction the words came from. Would you care to enlighten us? What do you mean by that statement, Blackwell-kun? Contemporary medicine still hasn't found a solution for failing internal organs. Heart attacks, kidney failures, cirrhosis, Ash enumerated. When an organ dies, we die with it. Yet a heart is nothing more than a shunt pump. Kidney and liver are merely filters. Japan is the world's unquestionable leader in the production of artificial eyes and hearing-improving devices, is it not? Then why not consider restoring more than that? By doing it, we may not only save countless lives, but also prolong and sustain them, reclaim them even. Surely you jest, Blackwell-kun. Are you seriously taking transplanting mechanical organs into humans under consideration? An everlasting heart? Takashima's words were dripping with derision. What next? An automaton with a human brain? The students chuckled. With all due respect, sensei, it's not a pipe dream. Ash remained calm. As I mentioned before, both heart and kidneys are very simple mechanisms. Designing artificial ones shouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't surprise me if we even came out with something far more efficient eventually. Is that so? Indulge me then. How would you make an organ like that work, given it has been accepted by the recipient's organism in the first place? A heart isn't something you can turn off before going to bed and wind up in the morning. It works constantly. How would you do that, pray tell? I believe electricity might be the key, Sensei. Connecting an eye with a brain is simply a matter of puncturing the right spot on the cerebral hemisphere with a thin wire, isn't it? And automails? What keeps them working without being wound externally? A significant amount of electricity produced by the body itself. Thanks to the founding fathers of neurobiology, Émile Dubois-Reymond, Richard Caton, and Adolf Beck, we've been able to determine the electrical nature of the nerve signal. And we know that certain regions of the brain are responsible for certain bodily functions. If we managed to establish the connection between an automail and the nerves of a particular body part, then finding a similar one with an artificial organ is only a matter of time and experiments, with animals as subject, of course. Ash got a little carried away with excitement. In my opinion, it should be possible to initiate a heartbeat with some kind of an electrical shock. With the perfect calculations made, once it starts pumping, it should work without further stimulation. In case it stops, we could revive it in the same way. Of course, that would require experimenting on cadavers and... Ah, the professor broke in. So, you're one of those Mary Shelley reading immortality seekers, aren't you? The expression on his face went from mocking to ominous. Let me be clear with you, and that includes all of you here, for I'm not going to repeat myself. Apart from the fact that the electricity issue is still being discussed by the Japanese government, some say it's a devil's creation, no one of a sound mind would allow those kinds of experiments. Prolonging life that has already ended is not only against nature, it's reprehensible. To even think of it is a blasphemy. If I were you, I wouldn't start this topic ever again in my class, Blackwell-kun, unless you don't want your certification at the end of the year. Takashima looked at his timepiece. Finally, a lunch break. Dismissed. Ashton left the class flushed and shaking with anger. Bloody zoolist. Being looked down upon was nothing new to him, but he never thought his teacher would be so narrow-minded. Devil's creation? Blasphemy! They were scientists, dammit. People in the past burned at the stake for dreaming about flying machines, and now everyone breaks those so-called laws of nature on a daily basis. If we stop advancing in fear of angering this or that imaginary god, then what's the point of being a scientist in the first place? Blackwell-kun? Taken by surprise, Ash looked behind him with the same huffy expression. What? For a moment, irritation got the better of him. He drew a deep breath to calm himself down. The guy who called him out was one of his fellow Japanese students. What can I do for you, Yamada? Pardon me, I'm terrible at names. My name is Yukimura Sanada. With the obligatory introduction made, the Japanese student immediately cut to the chase. There's something I'd like to show you. When Ash woke up, it was already around noon. Crap. He'd promised Kanako he'd leave first thing in the morning. Hopefully she wouldn't get in any trouble because of him. Anyway, he should take his sorrowful ass out of here as soon as possible. Standing up, he saw a note along with a bowl of cold soup left for him on the table. It took him a while to decipher the English words written in katakana. You can use our bathroom. A towel and a fresh yukata await you by the door. The party ended at dawn, and I'm going to bed now. My apologies for not seeing you off. Good luck. And some kanji symbols, most probably meaning Kanako. Poor girl, now nesting God knows where because he overslept. But damn, after all that happened, he could really use some refreshment right now. Ash hungrily sipped the cold miso soup, put the yukata on, and went downstairs. Fortunately, the pleasure abode seemed almost abandoned, which made the whole situation less awkward. And thanks to the traditional interior, finding the bathroom didn't take him long. Taking a bath was a good idea after all. It refreshed his body and cleared up his mind. He still didn't know how to exactly handle his current situation, but at least being clean and shaved for the first time in days slightly buoyed him up. Time to go. What a shame he couldn't wash and dry his dirty clothes. His lodgings weren't safe to even go near them, so his only option was to buy some new clothes later. At this time of the day, Asakusa resembled a busy beehive. It was loud, vivid, and pleasantly fragrant. Rickshaws, both mechanical and pulled by the power of men, were taking people in and out. Outside the market, Ash stopped by the cherry tree to look at the buds. I promised Aoi we'll go to see Sakura blossom together. Then he remembered, and hot tears stung him in the eyes. Aoi was gone, along with his job and studies. "You there, Igirisu!" A tall silhouette in black police uniform strode his way. Ash shivered at the sight of the sword. After the end of the shogunate, only one man in Japan had the government's authorization to carry a katana in public. This is bad. How foolish of him to just stand there in the open. Even in such a cosmopolitan city, his blonde hair and foreign features showed up. "Stop right there!" Ash ran, ignoring the sound of the whistle alarming other officers to join the pursuit, and didn't slow down until he had completely left Asakusa behind. Out of breath, he looked around, scouting for a hideout. That street. He knew a place nearby, but promised himself to never go there again. Another distant, high-pitched zing helped him make up his mind. Screw it, it's a sink or swim. He approached one of those high European tenement houses, hurried down to the souterrain, and rattled the door. Please be at home. A few heartbeats later, the door creaked open, showing a young Japanese man in a leather apron, with goggles on his forehead. Smudges of soot on his face proved he was in the middle of welding something. "Ash!" Almond-shaped eyes widened in surprise. "Hello, Sanada." "May I come in?" Not without hesitation, Sanada made way. With both inside, he locked the door, and together they went to the murky but spacious room, functioning as workshop, living room, and kitchen together. "I need a minute to freshen up." Sanada took off his apron. "Be right back." Ash didn't move, memory-stricken. So many months spent here with Sanada planning, constructing, dreaming, quarreling. It's where their friendship started. They teamed up to achieve something no one else has achieved before. And to their detriment, they succeeded. Everything here looked awfully familiar. The huge workbench covered with plans and random tools, automail parts, the pile of medical books, a map of the human brain on the wall, and finally the exact resin replica of a human heart from the anatomy class. A generator Ash had built himself was tucked in the corner of the room. He smiled, remembering Sanada's rant. "We don't have any electricity yet, so unless you rather wait for a thunderstorm, I suggest you stop whining." Sanada could be a real pain in the ass when he wanted something. Ash combed through many pieces of paper cluttering the table and picked one of them. "That's the one." His chest tightened. "The one that started it all." "Well?" Sanada inquired impatiently. "What do you think?" Ash studied the sketch from every angle. "To be completely honest, I expected something, I don't know, something heartier?" Sanada rolled his eyes. "That's rich from a guy who told Takashima a heart is merely a pump. For your information, that's exactly what it is. Forgive my skepticism, I didn't expect it to be that simple. Is it really going to work?" Sanada dove under the table and stood up, holding a metal box with a padlock in his hands. He unbuttoned his collar and pulled out a key from the chain he was carrying around his neck. "You are the first person I'm showing this to, so you are sworn to secrecy," he warned, unraveling the box's content. From the outside, the yellow-colored device approximately resembled a human heart. Given the silent permission, Ash carefully took it out. "The rollers turn, compressing the tube and pushing the blood in and out," Sanada explained the project. "The amount of blood pumped can be adjusted by the speed of the rotation of the rollers and how much pressure is on the occlusion point. In other words, the more pressure, the more blood is pumped. We are still about to determine what's the best amount for a healthy human, but I assure you, when I'm done calculating, this heart will be unstoppable." Ash knocked the heart with his knuckle. "Is it gold?" "Do I look like a Croesus to you? It's electrum, mostly from the pawn shop, so I wouldn't wager on its quality. Good enough for a prototype, though." Impressive. Genuinely intrigued, Ash carefully put the mechanism back into the box. "May I ask, what do you need me for exactly?" "I haven't figured out yet how to make it start pumping on its own." Sanada gave him a long look. "That's the part when you're coming in, my friend." And so I did. I found a way. I wish I hadn't. Ash dropped the sketch and took a sit on a shabby fauteuil. The sky behind the smudgy basement window seemed distant and somber. "Sorry to keep you waiting," his friend returned. Yukimura Sanada represented the high-cheekboned adolescent Bishonen type from popular magazines, adored both by men and women. He was nothing short of a genius, but his pretty face often prevented him from being taken seriously, not to mention that it got him constantly molested by random people. Even Aoi was in awe during their first meeting, making Ash jealous. "Don't sulk," she buttered him up. "I like you more." "Here." Sanada offered Ash a drink and sat down on the opposite chair. Ash hated lukewarm sake, but today he was anything but picky. They drank in silence. 2 shots later, Sanada dared to speak. "You surprise me. The last time I saw you, you swore to avoid me like a pestilence." Involuntarily, he touched his jaw. The bruise Ash left on it a few days ago was still visible. "I didn't come of my own volition, but I have to stay low for an hour or two." A nod in return. "Is it Fujita again? He's been asking around about you and Aoi." "He's all over me. Thanks to his snooping in the guild, my license is on hold, and the university got me suspended." Ash buried his face in his hands. "Oh God. Of all people, why is this happening to me?" "For starters, it was you who delivered the subject in broad daylight," Sanada pointed out. "Secondly, someone eavesdropped on Aoi threatening she will report us to the police. Fujita simply did the math." Ash quietly gritted his teeth. A subject. On the other hand, weren't Yukimura's words justified? In the end, all they got was an abomination of life. A thing. "Yuki," he whispered, tormented. "What have we done?" Sanada shrugged. "We did it for science. We both knew the risk and took it anyway." His tone was dismissive, but there were myriads of emotions dancing in his eyes. "My only regret is we didn't stick to that dog, though." When the heart was complete, Yukimura brought home a dog found on the street. It was hit by a cart and was on the verge of dying. They sedated it to the point when its own heart stopped, and tried to replace it with their device. Trembling, Ash emptied another cup. It all flashbacked to him at once. The blood, the dog's opened chest, its heartbeat fading before their very eyes. What happened next was a blur, but he remembered himself shouting, "Fix it, Sanada!" Death and revival. electricity crackling, the stench of burned flesh. And the scream. Oh my God, that scream. Gagging on it, Ash sprung up and hurried to the door. It seems coming here was a terrible idea. I'm leaving. One more thing. Sanada's low voice held him. Did you put it down? Ash froze with his hand on the knob, eyes fixated on the door before him, yet blind to anything but the memory imprinted on his brain like a hand on the snow. Strapped to the chair, it wriggled with pain. No medication could soothe its suffering. I tried. Ash choked on his tears. But we did well, Yuki. Too well. The heart was unstoppable. Without another word, Ash left. For the next few hours, he roamed the streets without knowing where he was headed. He just moved forward, indifferent towards the laughing people around him and the festive atmosphere, even towards time. The sanguinary light of the setting sun painted everything red. Sakura orchards filled the air with their sweet scent. Soon the festival would begin. The lanterns would illuminate the night. The fireworks would be launched. Life itself would go on, and amidst the celebration, no one would notice the tragedy of the single soul. Ash stopped only after his feet seized up. He was on the Nijubashi Bridge, near the Imperial Gardens. The Sumida River hummed quietly beneath, its surface reflecting lights from the trees around the Edo castle. Too much beauty to witness alone. This simple realization stung like hell. If only Aoi were with him now. They would have stuffed themselves full with manju and then gone dancing under the blossoming trees. He would have picked the prettiest flower and tucked it in her hair. She would have smiled at him, and then an invisible force grabbed Ash from behind and threw him on the ground. He was so stunned he didn't realize what exactly was going on until the edge of a Japanese sword flung right by his face. "Finally caught you," said Inspector Goro Fujita coldly. "You kept me busy for the last few days, and gave me quite a walk from your friend's place, Igrisu. Playing time is over. There's nowhere to run, and nobody to save you from me. Now." The tip of the katana was inches away from Ash's throat. "Tell me, where is Aoi Hirata?" If he wasn't so sick and tired of everything, including being alive, Ash could have tried to escape, probably dying in the process. Enough running. Now that he has been caught, he might as well get rid of this burden. "She's dead." Admitting it out loud for the first time kicked him in the guts, but there was a certain amount of relief to it. "But I didn't kill her," he added quickly, seeing his own death sentence in Fujita's eyes. "Liar. Several neighbors of yours reported a woman's screams coming out your lodgings. I saw the ungodly devices you kept there with my own eyes. I saw the chair she was strapped to, the syringes with morphine you'd injected her with, you bloody murderer." "It was an accident. She fell off the stairs during an argument, I swear." One word after another, Ash told the inspector everything about Aoi's sudden interruption at his workshop, while he and Sanada were transplanting their device into a dead stray dog. When she saw them gutting that poor creature, she freaked out. Ash followed her, but his explanations only fueled the fire. "You make me sick," she shouted into his face. "I'm going to report you both." They struggled, she lost her balance, and like that, in the blink of an eye, she was dead. Fujita listened, fury and disgust on his face. "I don't believe a single word you say. If you were truly innocent, you wouldn't have kept it secret. What did you do with the body? Burn it? Bury it? Her family has a right to know." "There is none." Ash barely moved his lips. "We brought her back." The inspector frowned. "What did you say?" The dam keeping Ash's tears inside broke at last. "I loved her. Couldn't bear to lose her, so I... With Aoi's corpse in his arms, he reappeared in the workshop, shouting at Sanada to fix her. At first, Yuki hesitated, but soon his scientific curiosity conquered the voice of reason. Using the generator Ash had built, they electrocuted Aoi's brain and the artificial heart simultaneously. Fujita's face turned white. "You didn't." "They did. And once they succeeded, the real nightmare began." Soon after Aoi's revival, Ash knew there was something undeniably wrong with her. He had to teach her everything anew, to eat, to speak, even to stop peeing herself all the time. What's worse, she was in constant pain, so administering morphine was the only solution to keep her still. Both of them were uncertain about what exactly went wrong, why she was like that. Perhaps her brain had been out for too long. Either way, Sanada insisted they should put an end to her misery. Ash refused. They even fought about it, and Ash told Yuki to never show his face ever again. God knows for how much longer he would have been deluding himself if he hadn't run out of morphine so soon. Agonized, Aoi screamed like a reprobate. Her eyes bled. Unable to watch her in that state, Ash unstitched her chest to stop the heart. It kept beating. He could either rip it out or kill her otherwise, but found himself incapable of doing it. Not to her. For the first time in his life, he prayed to all the gods Aoi believed in for strength, watched her crying with bloody tears, and cried along, his hand gradually finding its way to the pliers. Before he even got to sever the tubes and the wires, Aoi, no, that thing, unbuckled herself and attacked him. At some point, Ash managed to lock her in the room and escape. Might have felt like another lifetime, but it was only 2 days ago. No matter where he hid himself, Aoi followed him like a bloodhound. Seeing her crooked silhouette in the rain last night, Ash knew it was only a matter of time before she would have found him and killed him. Let her come. After causing her so much pain, he was ready to die at her hands, as he should. It's the only way for him to atone. Inspector Fujita's features resembled cold marble when he answered. "That's quite a story you told me, Igirisu. But don't think for a second I'll be fooled by it. You killed the poor girl in cold blood because you needed a specimen for your impudent experiments, and disposed of her right after. That much is clear. You're going to hang for your crimes. I'll see to it myself. Get up." The sword aside, the policeman grabbed Ash by his jacket and got him back on his feet. "Ashton Blackwell, I arrest you in the name of the Emperor. Now move it." Ash didn't move. He just stared at something with frightened eyes. When Fujita looked in the same direction, his jaw dropped. It was Aoi, or rather what was left of her, approaching them. Her sloppy movements were oddly inhuman. They resembled those of a broken automaton. But even though her neck was visibly sprained and her eyes were wild and bloodshot from indescribable agony, she didn't scream. "Ash!" she moaned. Hot tears rolled down Ash's cheeks. Aoi. "Yabai!" Inspector Fujita made a gesture for chasing evil spirits away. But Aoi was no spirit. She was real. "Ash!" she repeated feebly. "It hurts. It hurts." These were the only words she'd ever learned from him. Despite his sincere efforts to communicate with her, she remained something between an animal and a broken doll. She experienced hunger and pain like any other living being, but that's all her irreversibly damaged brain was capable of. Humanity, soul, the whole essence of the Aoi Ash once loved was gone forever. Right now she clutched the collar of her kimono, the very same she met her end in, and ripped it open, exposing the chest and the mechanical heart beating in the rupture between her breasts. Deep scratches marked the skin around it, the proof of a failed attempt to stop it on her own. A creature with even residual awareness would have simply torn it out. But a semi-sapient doll didn't know better. Someone had to do it for her. Aoi, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. In the meantime, the inspector regained his composure. Turn it off! Do you hear me? Turn off the heart! I can't. Ash shook his head. No one can. It's Everbeating. Fujita looked at the katana he still held in his hand. It trembled. Unbelievable. The former samurai and a member of the Shinsengumi police, who personally delivered death to the shogunate's enemies, shaking? If it wasn't fear, then what was it? Grief, Ash realized. He's grieving. Ash! It hurts! The inspector made a decision, readjusted his grip, and moved forward. But Ash stopped him, saying, I started this, so it's my responsibility to put an end to it. Please let me. In a silent agreement, Fujita handed his precious sword over, although it seemed like parting with his own hand. Just then it occurred to Ash that the skies above Tokyo turned dark, and the night enveloped them softly like a blanket. Thankfully, most of the citizens were already in the gardens, awaiting fireworks, away from the current drama. Ash avoided Aoi's face. He concentrated on the heart instead. To his astonishment, it was perfect. Never really got a chance to look at it, at work, with a calm academic eye. Every gear turning with infallible precision, blood running in the transparent aortas, a steady pace unachievable for a real heart. What are you waiting for? Kill it, damn it! Fujita's words brought him back to earth. Aoi was only 2 arms lengths apart from him. One swing would be enough to chop her head off, but that wouldn't stop the heart. The chances Aoi's body would still move after that were slim. Nevertheless, he wasn't ready to take that risk. I must destroy the heart. Ash raised the sword at the height of Aoi's chest, letting her near him, and when her hands reached for his throat, asking forgiveness with his eyes, he drove the razor-sharp blade into the entanglement of wires and artificial vessels. Aoi groaned. Blood flushed down her body and soaked the front of the flowery fabric. With his other hand, Ash grasped the heart, pulled it out in one go, and threw it aside. A resonant clang scattered little parts, but even then it kept going. Cursing in Japanese, Inspector Fujita smashed the device with his heel again and again until it became nothing more than a pile of junk. Aoi's fingers dug into Ash's arms, slipped, her legs buckled, and then she collapsed. Ash caught her and knelt, holding her in his arms the very last time, and slowly eased her onto the ground. At the same exact moment, the sky bloomed with the sparky effusion of colors. There were cheers and laughs coming from every side of the city. The genuine curiosity with which Aoi, now heartless and bleeding to death, stared at the fireworks was the only human reaction Ash had seen after her resurrection. With the awe of a child witnessing magic for the very first time, an inarticulate sound in her throat, she reached up as if she wanted to touch these miraculous sparks. "Fireworks," Ash wept. "Hanabi. It's like you wanted, Aoi. We watched the fireworks together." Ha-na-bi. The last syllable articulated, Aoi acquiesced. Holding her hand that dropped, at long last allowed to mourn his loss, Ash completely ignored Fujita's presence as he came closer to collect and sheathe his katana. Not yet. He reacted exclusively to the inspector's attempt to close Aoi's glassy eyes. She loved fireworks. Let her watch till the end. Whatever thought formed in his mind, the policeman left it unspoken, took a small flask out of the inner pocket of his uniform, and drank from it. It was one of those situations he couldn't cope with while sober. In the ear-splitting cannonade, nobody heard the frail screeching of a single gear coming from the malformed piece of metal half trampled into the cobblestone, out of the ever-beating heart.